I'm not a shining example of how to run your garden, but what I can tell you is that I found several things that will make your garden easier to manage, and I'm going to show those things to you today. Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about the garden. You know, I talk all the time about how, you know, I've been really busy and kind of got behind, and in the last video I told you guys that, you know, we had quite a bit of storm damage that has sort of put a hurting on us in general, just with all the rain and our scheduling and stuff. But it also put a pretty good hurting on the garden. But good news, the garden's doing pretty good. The main reason that my garden is still doing all right, despite kind of all the crazy, is some things that I've done to try to make things easier. If you follow our channel, you know that last year our garden was a disaster. And this year, it started off a little rocky, and honestly, it's still not the best. I'm not a shining example of how to run your garden. But what I can tell you is that I found several things that will make your garden easier to manage, and I'm going to show those things to you today. And I want to start with our greenhouse. So despite everything outside and whether it's good or bad, the one consistent so far this year has been the stuff that's in here in the greenhouse is doing absolutely great. Which, again, this was just sort of a last minute pivot decision. The flower bed's only in here because I didn't have enough bricks to finish the floor. But as you can see, our tomatoes and the peppers and the marigolds, there's a few in the back, are all doing great in here. One of the tools that I've actually found quite useful is this Hori Hori knife from Vego. There are plenty of other brands. This just happens to be the one that I have, and I really like this because, as you can see, maybe you can see, let's bring you out here in the sun, it has measuring on it, which is great when you're planting, so you can see 1 to 5 inches of depth. It's also got these sharp areas on the edges, and I've actually found it really useful when I'm weeding the garden. I'm just going to use some of this grass right here because some of this stuff is real thick. Obviously it's better if you can pull weeds and stuff by the roots. It'll help keep your garden cleaner for a little bit longer, but if you can't, this knife makes a great assistant for pulling out some of these tougher pieces of grass. So it also comes with a sheath that you can throw on your belt, which I use somewhat often. And for anything that I've got that I talk about on the video, if I can find it, I'll leave links for it in the description. Now, I've already talked about one, but I'll go ahead and just say it again. We've got a couple of these Vego raised garden beds, and I really like these beds. But I've now bought 3 of these because I like them so much, and I'm guarantee I'm gonna buy a few more because I'd like to have some more raised beds. And the reason I call them out is because I've found that keeping these clean and maintained is a lot easier. You know, despite this one, you know, having a good bit of weeds in it, I've just found that keeping these raised beds pulled just seems to be a less strenuous task, and it seems to keep some of the smaller animals out. Like, be kind of difficult for rabbits to get up into this bed. So one of the things that I know a lot of people have trouble with is keeping their garden watered. So I'm going to show you a few things that I've done that this year have definitely worked out for me and made watering much easier. So you could go around your whole garden and water it one of these, or with a watering can. However, while I do that for some things, it's not very efficient. So one of the things that I have set up are soaker hoses. Now, I've got soaker hoses woven up and down the rows. We won't be able to see all of them, but I can show you some of it next to some of my weeds. So these are soaker hoses. You can get these pretty much anywhere. You can get them online, Walmart, any of your big box like home improvement stores or farm stores. You can pretty much get those anywhere. But get the good ones. The cheap ones kind of suck. And you know, run these down alongside your plants, and what they do, if you're not familiar, is as the water's turned on, these things are very porous, and the water will seep out of these. The one big drawback to these are if you get too many of them in line with one another, there's not enough water pressure to soak everything. So you might have to run 2 separate sections. But I used this last year and I'm using it again this year, and these have been really successful for me. Some of our marigolds are blooming. They look awesome, different colors. Anyways, you can see I've got those running over here, and they hook up just like a standard garden hose, and they help keep everything sort of watered. So there's mixed opinions at times about whether you should spray everything down like overhead or just soak it at the ground, and I don't understand all of the reasons well enough to necessarily say one way or the other. The one thing I can say confidently is if you are going to overhead water your garden, you really don't want to do it in the peak of the day when the sun's real high, because it will burn the leaves. It's you know, the water droplets will create like a magnifier effect, and it'll cause burn spots and stuff. Some more marigolds about to bloom, and our tomatoes are doing pretty great. Now, if you are going to use an overhead sprinkler, and I do use it from time to time, this thing is pretty awesome. This gets really good range. It's fairly stable. And as you can see, it's spraying water all over me. So I don't remember the official specs on it, but for my garden here, this thing will spray the entire thing. And you can set it to a, you know, narrow range, or you can open this up so that it can really get a good pan on it. Now, along with watering is having enough, well, connections. And you know, you may have several, you know, hydrants out near your garden, but for me, I'm just tapping this one off the side of my house, and I find that I have several different things that I like to water. And so having one of these multi connection valves here is pretty great. And the other thing that I really appreciate are these quick connects. You can also get these quick connects pretty much anywhere, and I'll share links to some of these. But these are great, and I've had really good luck with them not leaking. So get you a couple of male and female ends, connect a few things, and connecting and disconnecting your water hoses, no matter how many different things you might need, it's really easy. All right, so enough about watering. Let's talk a little bit about the weeding. So I already showed you one of the tools I like to use when I weed. But this year in particular, I've been trying to figure out how can I do less weeding without doing a whole bunch of sprays and stuff. A lot of gardeners will use something called preened, or a similar product that essentially stops seeds from germinating. And there may be more to it than that, but generally what it does is it just stops the weeds from wanting to sprout after you've gone through and tilled and done whatever else you're going to do to prep the garden. And so you do that before you ever plant your seeds, or you do it after you've already gotten everything well established and started, so that you're not worrying about it preventing your stuff from, you know, germinating. But since I'm trying not to use that kind of stuff as much as I can, what I decided to do when my garden started to get out of control this year is just put down a weed barrier. And you've probably seen some of those larger gardens, especially like market gardens and stuff, where they'll have basically this huge black, you know, weed barrier that covers the whole garden, and then you go through and you poke holes and plant whatever you want to plant. And well, I didn't do that this year, but after getting into the season a couple of weeks and realizing I was already getting behind on stuff, and I was desperate to make sure that my garden didn't get overrun like it did last year, I went back and did it after the fact. And I just used basic everyday, you know, weed barrier, not anything fancy, and it's not the big rolls, but it was easier to manage with stuff already being down. So let me show you that. And while I'm showing you the weed barrier, I'm gonna also do a little bit of a garden tour and show you what we've got going on. So this is just, you know, fabric like you'd put underneath a flower bed or something. Generally you would, you know, put this in around like landscaping and then cover it with mulch or gravel or whatever. This is a really cheap weed barrier that I already had. And then the next 2 rows are a little bit better quality stuff that I found. I think it's a Scott's brand. I couldn't even tell you what this stuff is. And then that over there is actually silage tarp, which I'm not using to weed around the plants necessarily. I just used it to recover the part of the garden that I ultimately never got a chance to plant. So didn't want to get overrun with grass, so we just covered it up with big heavy plastic, and nothing's gonna grow through that. One of the things that's consistently doing well in our garden are marigolds, and I forget the type of marigold that these are, but this one stays short and bushy. And so along this trellis, if you've seen our earlier video, we planted snap peas, some of the marigolds, and some acorn squash. And well, this is the only acorn squash that survived. And so we've been sort of extra protective of it. With the weed barrier right here, had I done that before installing all of this, this weed barrier would actually be under this and we'd have no issues here. But we do, because I didn't think about doing that ahead of time. So if you're gonna put down the weed barrier, do it well in advance of planting anything. Here we've got a volunteer tomato, no telling what it is, but I'm letting it grow because why not? And some more marigolds. Unfortunately, my daughter's snap pea was a victim of the storms. I put it back in the ground. It got broken off. The wind broke it off down here at the base. I buried the base and soaked it in water to see if maybe it'll try to reroot. And it hasn't completely died yet, so maybe there's a chance, but I don't have a lot of hope for it. It's okay. She's been out here helping take care of other stuff. She's excited, and we may end up calling our garden Garden of Eden, because my daughter, well, she's loving the garden. These guys are not wanting to grab on to the trellis real well because they're not doing so good. So you can see that at the base, they basically the wind broke off a lot of them, and they were not doing great because of the soil not being good quality. And by the time I got them fertilized, it was a little late. So we'll see how much, if anything, they produce. They're trying, but not holding my breath on these guys. More marigolds, more volunteer tomatoes, and yeah, that's pretty much this whole row. Those marigolds might be the best part of the garden. All right, this second row right here, this entire row is yellow squash. These guys got beat to pieces by the storms that came through, and I'll be honest, I thought most of them were completely broken off at the base. It turns out, because our soil quality is not very good, that they just started to try and uproot because their root wasn't real strong. So maybe silver lining of having bad soil is that they didn't break, they just tried to uproot, and they've taken back really, really well. All right, you may notice too, if you've watched some of our other videos, we used some cardboard to help lay down. I did that especially as much as I had underneath this, because this is not good quality and you can actually see through it if you look close enough. And so some of the grass under that is still getting enough sunlight to try and grow, which is unfortunate. Now that stuff, on the other hand, I already had a pretty well established weed bed going. And so when I put this down, it, you know, still lumpy because of it, and I didn't have enough staples. So these things, you can weigh them down with anything, which you can tell I've done, but it also comes with these staples here. Well, you have to buy these extra, but these are landscape fabric staples, and you just press them into the ground and they help hold this stuff down. I know that this garden is not pretty and it's not the most ideal setup, but by golly, it's our garden and it's working for us this year, and it's a lot better than it was last year. All right, so I'll stop boring you with too much. We've got a row of bush beans and a couple of more volunteer tomato plants down there that I'm letting go. We've got some more marigolds around here, and then the few of these larger ones in this row are zucchini plants. These guys didn't do as well I'm not sure if it was because I used old seeds or what exactly, but we'll do what we can. Here's what I meant when it tore in the middle of that storm, and so done what I can, make it work for the rest of this year. All right, and then last but not least, we got pepper plants and stuff here. I didn't really bother covering these, but I might go back and do that. This part of the garden is, again, more low quality soil, so even the weeds don't do super hot. So we'll see if our peppers do anything here, but we got more in case these don't. And then marigolds, more cherry tomatoes. Again, same deal, I didn't have enough to cover these. Another marigold. These are the much taller ones, by the way. Again, I can't remember the variety. And then the rest of our big tomato plants. So stuff to get down and weed around some of this, and some of this I'll just pull, and occasionally I'll get down here with that the knife I showed you guys, and I'll dig out and pull out weeds. So as you can see, the garden's not perfect, and it's not like I have a magic bullet for making it just a great garden, because low soil quality, not a lot of time to take care of it the way it really needs to be to get the best out of it. But we're in a lot better shape than we were last year, and some of those tips, which I'll summarize here in a minute for you, is what's helped me really get better. And so to sort of summarize, make your water more efficient. You know, get like the Manifold and the quick connects, and you know, try your hand at the soaker hoses. I think they're pretty good. You know, second, go with some raised garden beds. Honestly, those have been the easiest thing to manage, and even manually watering them, I just don't have near the trouble out of those as I do the stuff that's in the ground. It's easier to control the soil quality. It's easier to control how much water they're getting. It drains really well. There's less pest pressure, it seems. I can't say enough about it. I'll be doing more and more of the raised beds as we go. And then lastly, put down some weed barrier. If you're not really wanting to spray, which I'm trying to avoid, put down some weed barrier, then put your plants in, and honestly, I don't really think you're gonna have to worry about it. And if you're easy with it, I've seen where some people have reused those year after year. Now, the low quality stuff that I'm using, probably not, but the stuff that you can get like from the, you know, the co-op and places like that, the big heavy duty stuff, it's a little expensive, but it's probably a one or, you know, an occasional expense as opposed to every year. But I haven't used those very much. It's been years since I've touched that stuff, so don't hold me to that one. I hope you found this helpful. I'm glad I got a chance to show you guys the garden on a nice sunny day for a change, and we'll talk again soon. You guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.